Okay, well, hello, everyone. It's great to be back with you. Welcome to 33 Voices' Edge Dialogue series, where we get an opportunity to speak with some of the world's most distinguished thinkers and doers about ideas that they have that we think could really give you an edge in your business and in your life. And I'm delighted today to be joined by AmyK Hutchens, who is a seasoned executive, a brilliant strategist, and a very, very savvy collaborator. She's no stranger to the executive suite, as she has led inside and out billion-dollar companies. But what I'm most excited about today is the opportunity to share her latest project. I wish we had a copy of the book here. The Secrets That Leaders Don't Tell You. And we're going to get a glimpse of that today. So great to be with you.
Thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here.
And you're my neighbor.
I am your neighbor. I am right around the corner, right? So it's a small world. Literally, we can.
But as I shared with you, when I look at a book like that, I think that there is probably something inside of you that you're yearning to learn more about when you tackle a project like that. What was missing for you that ignited this? Because I've never seen anything like this.
Okay. Well, thank you. I hope that's a good thing.
That's a really good thing.
I have been really privileged as a consultant and a confidant. I have been able to step into the heads of thousands of leaders in the last 15 years. And I have witnessed their fears and their foibles. And I have been their consultant and their confidant. And I know what makes their palms sweat. I know what makes their stomach turn. I know what keeps them up at 2 a.m. And I think what was missing for me is that feeling of being alone and knowing that you're not alone and trying to figure out how you get past that. I mean, we're all human. Whether you've got a great title or you're an aspiring leader, we've all struggled. We've all got fears and foibles that we're trying to work through. And so underneath that title and that jacket is just a human being that needs to know they're not alone.
Well, they're not. And I'm sure that your work continues to shape your perspective of leadership. But just with this project in particular, how has your perception of the leaders you work with changed throughout the process?
I think my perception is that I respect them even more. I mean, I've always respected leaders for what they do, for the risk-taking, for the decision-making, for the responsibility that's on their shoulders. But after having worked in all of these think tank environments where they come as a human being so vulnerable and so insecure, pretending to be something bigger and badder and bolder, because they have to.
They have to.
Absolutely. I mean, we want somebody who's confident. We want somebody who's got a really clear vision. But that 2 o'clock in the morning rumbling, that stirring of feeling like you're an imposter, feeling like you're a fraud. And so that's where they trip up. And one of the things that I think that I've learned in the course of this is that the leadership learning curve is continuous. You are not going to ever arrive on the job having it all figured out. It's just not how the world works. No. The world is going to serve you lessons every single day. But here's the flip of it. Most of us want the lessons to stop. Like, we're tired of it. And what you realize is if you embrace it, if you stay open-minded, you just continue to learn. And as you do that, you become a better leader.
Well, I know that the majority of the people that you see and meet for the first time are brilliant leaders, and they show their brilliance on the outside.
Yes.
As you just referenced, on the inside, there's lots going on. What do you find that's often missing?
The willingness to be vulnerable. The willingness to actually admit that they don't have it all figured out. I think that your ability to lead successfully is a direct reflection of the secrets that you keep. And those leaders that are willing to face their secrets, look at their transgressions, and turn a transgression into a transformed opportunity actually end up leading more successfully. And I think that's when you look at some of the most successful, in hindsight, leaders that we've had throughout history, irrespective of industry, they're ones that were being vulnerable. They're ones that were willing to say, okay, I had a misstep or I made a mistake. I mean, Abraham Lincoln is a great example of a man who stood up, was not proud of some of his early decisions, but he learned from them. And he became a much better leader.
Well, I want to read something to you because you said something early on that I think is really important. When leaders replace their feelings of inadequacy and paranoia about being discovered as a fraud with realistic assessments about their valuable contributions. They focus less on their shortcomings and failures and more on what they can do best to leverage their talents and gifts to create value. That says a lot, but kind of put that in context for me, because if we can just leave everyone with one message, it's that.
There's a fantastic character named Helen in this book, and I say that she's fantastic because she's the quintessential amalgamation of a lot of leaders that I've worked with. And that's something that I did in this book, is I didn't write the 10 steps to being a great leader.
Thank you.
I wrote very creative monologues, 7 men, 7 women, amalgamations of the fears and the foibles. And she represents one that made mistakes early on. And what I've noticed with leaders is that they're extraordinarily critical, but they are most critical of themselves. They are truly their harshest critics. And so they can get stuck there. They can get caught up in their mistakes and their missteps, and then they start to make decisions from a place of fear or distrust of themselves. Those leaders that say, okay, here was the lesson. Here's what I did wrong. Here's what I've learned with it, but I'm going to take it and I'm going to make a much wiser decision. I'm going to be much more discerning moving forward. They're the ones that actually move forward. They're the ones that end up getting out of their own way.
So do you think, is it a leadership myth that leaders would rather be respected than liked?
Oh, leaders want to be liked a little too much.
And that was all over the book.
And it is.
Every single one.
Exactly. And I think that is the myth that so many leaders have, is that if I'm liked, you'll respect me. Not so much. And if you go back, and this is not, I can make fun of both sides of the political aisle. But when we say with one of our leaders that we're going to, have a barbecue or we're going to have a beer with them, doesn't mean they should be our leader. Maybe they should be our friend, but it doesn't mean that they should be our leader. And so there's one character in the book, she spends her whole journey trying to figure out that likability isn't going to actually make her respected.
And that's something that we can talk a lot about, because one of the things that springs up when you think about this whole likability thing is what you talk about with self-forgiveness and self-compassion. And that's really hard for people.
It is hard.
Especially leaders. Why is it so difficult? You've seen the ones who have embraced the ability to forgive themselves, and you've seen others who have fought it. For the ones who embrace it, what makes it easy for them, but how do you deal with that?
They let go of perfectionism. There's extraordinarily high standards by high achievers, which is why it leads to, again, the self-criticism, having unrealistic expectations of the human experience. It's the imposter syndrome. It's the I'm not worthy of my followers. I'm a fraud. At some point, they're going to figure out I'm not brilliant. I don't have enough skills. I don't have enough business acumen. I don't have enough money or resources or enough of a network. And it's all that. I joke, it's called shitting on yourself. And I tell leaders, stop shitting. It is. It's true. I should have, I should be, I should do this. But one of the things that we talk about too is the authentic voice. There's a story in The Secrets Leaders Keep of a politician. And she ends up trying to be liked by everybody. And so she talks out both sides of her mouth. And then she ends up realizing, and she jokes, the reason that there are so few women in politics is it's really time consuming to put makeup on 2 faces. And so, it's a joke, but it's kind of true. Politicians, but also other leaders. You don't have to just be a politician. You can be any leader trying to please too many people, and you lose your way. You lose your moral compass, you lose your directional compass.
Tell me what happens when I, as a leader, for the first time, really, truly forgive myself.
You experience a relief and an openness that is so profound that you actually start to let go of control, and you're more open to the next new idea, the next connector, the next person that's trying to help you become an even greater multiplier. When you can let go and stop controlling everything, you open an unbelievable amount of doors.
Well, and I'm sure one of the most challenging things that you see when you work with people like that, on issues like that, is that in order for us to let in the new me, I have to say goodbye, and you mentioned that in the book, to the old me.
You do.
That's not easy either, right? How do I kill the old me once and for all so I can start to invite the new me in?
We call it leaving the hood. And I actually,
we absolutely have to leave the hood.
One of the things that we've done in the book is Every short story is followed by questions that are forcing leaders to sit back and reflect and think about what's preventing them from winning bigger in business and life. And one of the things that prevents them from winning bigger is their inability to let go of the hood. And what we mean by that is that you have early primary programmers that tell you through labels, through limiting beliefs, what you can and cannot be. You're only going to go so far, or you can only be so successful. And so you end up being an adult, and you say, well, how did glue-sniffing Joey become the CEO of a company? Or how did crybaby Carrie become a hotshot litigator? And that's because Joey and Carrie at one point said, I will not be defined, and I will not be truncated by my neighborhood. I've got to break free. I've got to let go and realize that in order to truly actualize your brilliance and meet your potential, you're going to have to let go. And it's going to be painful in the process, because not everybody's going to be thrilled when you tell them that they're not going to define you.
It's going to be painful, but I'm letting go so I can let a better version of me.
Absolutely.
It's the habit and the discipline of being stuck in the past is really challenging. And you mentioned Brene Brown in your book, and you mentioned her work on vulnerability. And she talks about greatness will only emerge when you're able to address those vulnerabilities.
It's true.
And we're still in a society that hasn't embraced that.
No, because we send people really mixed messages. We tell people to be vulnerable, and then they are, and then we criticize them for not being confident enough or trying to manipulate people. One of the things that I think that's really important is that vulnerability is not about being on a couch and having a therapy session in front of your followers. What it means is owning the fact that you're human, that you're going to make mistakes. There was the football coach here on the West Coast not too long ago that ended up having a pretty serious misstep, and he got drunk at a college event. Yes, and what I love about it is, and I do say I love this about it, not that he had a misstep, what he did in response to it. He went to the football players, he apologized, and then Cody Kessler, their quarterback, came out and said, you know what, we respect him even more. He came to us as a man. He apologized for his behavior. We have complete respect for Coach Sarkisian. He's an awesome man, but we love him more today because he apologized. That's being vulnerable.
When we talk about being inadequate, right? Mm-hmm. This is something that's been going on for ages, right? I think almost every human being has to deal with that, not just leaders. But in your work with leaders in particular, when you touch this point of someone being inadequate or feels like they're inadequate, mm-hmm. what is often missing?
Confidence that they can figure it out, belief in their ability to problem solve, or even ask for help, which is another form of vulnerability. So one of the things that I've noticed is that inadequacy typically boils down to two fundamental thoughts. It's either I don't have enough, fill in the blank, or I'm not good enough. And it's amazing how when you do all the distilling work in coaching with fears, that they always they boil down to I am not good enough or I don't have enough. And it could be that I'm not good enough, and if I say I'm not good enough at figuring out franchising, then what you do is you look at that thought and you say, well, is that really true? Is that 100% true? Let's problem solve. What are you good at? Who could you go and ask for help? How could you leverage the strengths that you already have? And so once leaders replace inadequacy with, well, I have the ability to problem solve. I don't have to know everything. I don't have to have it all figured out. But I do need to be smart enough to ask the better question. Who can I go for help? What am I missing? What other perspectives would help me solve this? Then they actually galvanize their success.
So when you're working with somebody who embraces that mm-hmm. and does say goodbye to the hood mm-hmm. and starts to think that he or she is fully adequate, fully capable, what have you seen happen with their productivity or their leadership?
It skyrockets. And it becomes a model for others. And so it's a sort of an exponential result. It's not just that their life becomes more fulfilled, but they become a model and a spark in igniting everybody else's passion and purpose. And so one of the things that we talk about is that Coach Ronnie Parker, he's a football coach in the book, and he's the last story in the book because he has truly figured out how to be what I call a multiplier. And a multiplier is somebody that has figured out that in order to be fulfilled, in order to be actualized as a human being, you have to arrive at the intersection of pleasure and purpose. You have to realize that what you're doing is joy-filling, you love, you're called to do it, but that there's also a long-term purpose to it. It doesn't mean every day is rainbow and unicorns.
Definitely isn't.
No, it's blood, sweat, and tears. But at the end of the day, the overall arcing sensation is that I love what I do, and there's purpose behind it. And then that becomes a model to his football players, to the other kids in the school. And what people want to do is they want to gravitate to that. They want to know, what is it that makes you so happy? What is it that makes you brilliant in business, happy in life, so fulfilled and filled with joy? Because a lot of people can't figure it out. They're trying, again, to either be what people told them from their early days, or they're trying to be what media tells them to be. Or I like to say, Mo, that they give their power away. And my question for leaders is always, how do you get it back? How do you actually take power back over your own life so that you can fulfill your own personal destiny?
Well, that's a great point, because you say they give their power away, and I've seen that in some leaders that I know very intimately myself, and they were sharing a story with me about their media training. You know, just much like you go on national television to talk about your work, they have to go and talk about their company.
Yeah.
And it's really fascinating to really see what these media coaches teach them, because they really brainwash them.
Oh.
When you talk about giving away your power, you're not, what you're about to do is exactly scripted as most people do, which is awful.
Well, you know, and what's interesting too is that I put literally a script in front of me of the sound bites that I want to say, and I can tell you that 90% of the time I'm off script.
Most of us are. Because
it's the real world. I mean, we're having a real conversation today, and I want to talk about the book, and I know the book intimately, but the minute that you brainwash somebody, you remove all authenticity, you remove being present. And that's another thing that I talk about with leaders, is that if you have fear is usually in the moment, and we can deal with that. You're present. There's something that's bothering you. But when you have overwhelming anxiety, you are usually thinking about the future, and the future's not here yet. So let's stay in the present moment. Let's dissolve the fear, and then anxiety drops instantly. You also get your power back that way. Getting your power back also means, okay, if I'm going to go on and the media tell me what it is that I'm going to say, it's going back and saying, well, do I really care what everybody else thinks? This is what I'm called to do. And it's in every decision that we make for leaders. You know, what will they say? What are they going to think if I do this? I often give examples, what will they say if I quit this job? What will they say if I pursue my passion? What will they say if I go back to school, have another kid, move across the country? Well, do you really care what they say? Because usually they is 3, 4, 5 people max. They're from your old neighborhood, and you should have let them go anyway.
Yeah, it's fascinating, and that was really an eye-opening. I've never seen media training in action until I saw what they had to go through, which was very interesting. I want to talk about challenges and adversity for a moment.
Yeah.
Because, again, you talk a lot about it in the book, and I'm sure that's probably the anchor of everything that you do. But have you discovered a skill or a discipline that is really important in helping people overcome some of these adversities that we all face every day?
Pity yourself really quickly. Have that moment. That's called real clean pain. You are allowed, it's your journey. So when leaders start saying, well, I shouldn't be upset about this because they're starving kids in Ethiopia, my first thing is technical foul. You're not in Ethiopia. You're not, doing horrible things, but this is your journey. So have some clean pain, have some real grief in the moment, and then I'm very direct and candid in saying, and then you're going to get over it. But this is how you're going to get over it. You're going to get outside of yourself and you're going to start serving somebody else. And that is one of the biggest benefits to thought processing, is not getting stuck in your own world. And that is looking outside of yourself and saying, okay, I'm here to serve. There's really no greater purpose on this planet than to make it easier for somebody else to be on this planet, because it's not easy.
So give me an example of that. So I'm dealing with X challenge. I've got you as a coach. I grieve for 30 seconds and you tell me, get over it, all right? And let's figure out how to serve. I've got this world that I'm leading. How do I start? What's the first step?
What's your purpose? What are you here? What's your legacy for? Then how are we going to back into that? So where do you want to be in 5 years? Well, then what does that mean that you have to be a month before that, 6 months before that, 4 years down the road, 3, 2, 1? Well, then what are we going to do today to get outside of your own, oh, woe is me bubble and start getting you to feeling more productive and performing at a higher level? Because this is your legacy. I mean, a great question, and it's kind of pessimistic, and I'm always the glass is half full or the glass is too small kind of gal. But I'm constantly looking at, if for some reason your life got truncated tonight, would this be the way that you wanted to spend your last day? Would you feel good about who you are, the conversations that you've had, the actions that you took or that you didn't take? Now, I'm guilty. I'm human too. There are days, at 8, 9, 10 o'clock at night, I'm thinking, well, if my life was snuffed out today, this isn't the way that I'd want it to end. Well, that galvanizes me to play bigger, badder, better, bolder tomorrow.
One of the things that I hear a lot from people who work with leaders I really admire and respect is they always say something to the effect that this leader has my back. Mm-hmm. And it's rare, but it's common amongst the great ones. Is that a leader being selfless, or is that a leader just doing his job or her job really consciously? Because that's a really key point.
I think it's a conscious choice. And there's something that I'll steal from the armed services. So I think every day the men and women that serve our country and keep us safe. And so I give them credit for this concept. It comes from the Army. It's called unity of command. And unity of command is about being more loyal to the team that you play on than the team that you lead. And that really means that the people that you play with, not just your followers, but the people that you are making decisions with, that you are growing and changing the world with, you have their back. You go out and you talk with one voice. You don't undermine them. I don't walk down the street and say, well, Moe wants to grow the business overseas. Kind of a dumb idea, but I'll follow him if that's what he wants to do. No. You go out and you say, Moe wants to go overseas, and here's why we're going to do it. Now, if I disagree with you, I'm going to come and have a candid conversation with you, but I'm not going to throw you under the bus outside in the real world. I'm going to have your back. And let's say I really do disagree with you, and you know that. Then you come to me, and maybe now I am your follower, and you say, AmyK, I heard you. I respect your perspective. You're right. We're going to have some challenges expanding the business overseas, but here's what I need from you. Unity of command.
Which, it just makes so much sense.
It does, but we are not having these conversations.
We're not even close.
That's why I'm saying it's a conscious skill choice of leaders.
So it reminds me of, and I have to skip around here because one of my favorite chapters is on drowning.
Oh,
and
okay.
I have to find something I want to read to you from that.
Okay.
Somewhere along the path to success, leaders often drift onto someone else's path or into a ditch of desperation or self-destruction. Is the biggest culprit of that trying to please others or comparing ourselves to others?
Comparison. It's self-abuse. And comparison, I think it was Mark Twain that said comparison is one of the worst forms of self-abuse. And it really is. Because your legacy, your destiny, the reason that you were born is not the same reason that somebody else was born. And so two of the most cool things that happen is the day that you're born and the day that you figure out why you were born.
And again, that sounds so damn easy, but it really reminds me.
It's
not. It reminds me of a fascinating conversation with Barry Schwartz that I had about why we work. Mm-hmm. And he said, we're an obsessed society with being the best. Mm-hmm. And he says, when he wrote his book, The Paradox of Choice, and all three of his amazing TED Talks have got millions and millions of users. She said the real catalyst and the real thread in them is stop looking for the best and just settle for what's good enough, starting with yourself. And that really turned on a light for me because from a leadership perspective, I don't see that at all. Very few places that we're all looking for the best.
I think if you go back to comparison, I look out at all the best leaders out there. And when I start comparing myself, I have to immediately recognize I am not Richard Branson. I am not Jack Welch. And what a lot of leaders then do is say, well, then I'm not good enough to be that. Or I'm never capable or strong enough or talented enough to be that. Well, that's all going to truncate whatever potential you could have had in the first place. But if I just say, okay, look, the only person that I need to compete with is myself. I need to continue to grow. I need to continue to develop and learn and expand and challenge myself to grow each and every day. Who knows what I can do? Who knows what it's going to end up being? But it's not about being Richard Branson. Richard Branson's taken. Jack Welch is taken. You don't want to beat them anyway.
Yeah, I don't blame you. Yeah, they're cool people, but you don't want to take them. All right, a few more questions for you. Let's assume we're sitting and we're having this conversation with 25 of the brightest young leaders in the world who are doing great things in the world, building great companies regardless of where they are. What do you take from the message of your book to share with them? Because they don't have a lot of the baggage that the people you profile, myself and you included, they're kind of emerging. What do you want them to leave here knowing?
That the more that they challenge themselves to understand themselves, to face some of the childhood secrets that they do have. You don't really get to 18 without having a few secrets of your own. But to face that and work through them and realizing that as long as they always come home, as long as they always come back to themselves and are constantly trying to understand who they are so that they can play bigger and better, face their insecurities, face their vulnerabilities, face their fears, they will transform into absolutely brilliant young leaders.
What percentage of leaders you know do you think, just very generally, are living a double life?
100%.
And I wanted to hear that because to these 25 people, we want them to know, like you've said, you're not alone.
They're not alone. It's not lonely at the top. The other thing which I'll say to them is that they're going to hear, especially as young leaders, they're going to hear fake it till you make it. And I'm going to tell them that that's one of the worst pieces of advice that they will ever hear.
Thank you. Yeah, and I agree 100%. All right, my last question is leadership obviously is plain difficult.
Yes.
Right? It's hard. The only way you get better is you experience it, and you experience it in a moment. There's certainly an art to it, and there's certainly a science to it. Can you kind of leave us with the one lesson that we need to know about the art side and the one lesson that we need to know about the science part?
You got to dive in. Leadership is learned on the job. There is no course. There is no one magical curriculum. It's going to be continuous. There are tons of books that you should be reading. There are tons of classes that you should be taking, but you got to dive in. You're not going to show up and just have it all figured out. And the art and science combo that I would say that kind of comes together really well is that you have got to always be asking questions. You cannot stop learning. The leadership learning curve is going to go on forever, but it's only as good as the questions that you're willing to ask and answer and challenge yourself with.
Well, what I appreciate so much about AmyK's work and this book in particular are the real stories, right? They're real stories about real leaders running big companies, politicians, coaches that share real stories and real secrets that ordinarily you wouldn't. So for anyone who's watching, I'm not only encouraging you to pick up and understand what she's saying in the book, but more importantly, I really want you to embrace the version of you that you find in these stories. So one, what do you want them to get out of it? And number two, how do they learn more about your work? Because it goes way beyond the secrets that we've now learned about.
This book is so different. This book is, you're not going to find anything readily available in the marketplace like it. It's storytelling that you can resonate, that you can connect with. We learn through stories. We learn through parables. We don't need another PowerPoint presentation. We've all done that. We've done the decks. I want readers to find the character that they resonate with. And what we're finding is it's usually more than one. And then the questions, I want them to answer it. I want them to reflect. I want them to pick up the book and treat it like, you know what? This is one of the best life learning opportunities that I've had, and I'm going to spark myself to play bigger and bolder.
Well, we'll have all the links for you to check out the book and hopefully many more to come.
Thank you.
Thank you.